Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Music for a Book podcast, Season 3. We are your hosts. I'm Britt.
And I'm Hannah.
And every 2 weeks, we read and review a book, assign a song to that book, draw the parallels between the two, and have some fun along the way. So welcome back to Season 3, Episode 9 of the Music for a Book podcast.
Yes, and this week we've read The Slow Burn Mystery and Epic Tale, All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker.
Yes. And how this episode is going to work is we are going to go over trigger warnings and a brief synopsis for the book. Then we're going to reveal our song choices, which is our favorite part. After our song choices, we're going to move into what we like to call spoiler territory, meaning after that point, we'll be discussing anything and everything that happens cover to cover inside of this book. And if you're watching, you can see here, this is a hefty book. And we'll be doing things a little bit different this episode just because there's so much content. We'll explain in a little bit. So that would be your time after we go over everything there to pause and back out and come back once you've read the book if that's something that you would like to do. Dear reader.
So we're going to go over some brief book and theme warnings from Storygraph. So this book deals with kidnapping, murder, domestic abuse, confinement, child abuse, child death, grief, abortion, violence, blood, death of a parent, alcoholism, bully, rape, injury, detail, pedophilia, cancer.
And now our synopsis from Goodreads. 1975 is a time of change in America. The Vietnam War is ending, Muhammad Ali is fighting Joe Frazier, and in the small town of Montclair, Missouri, girls are disappearing. When the daughter of a wealthy family is targeted, the most unlikely hero emerges, Patch, a local boy with one eye who saves the girl and, in doing so, leaves heartache in his wake. Patch and those who love him soon discover that the line between triumph and tragedy has never been finer, and that their search for answers would lead them to truths that could mean losing one another. A missing person mystery, a serial killer thriller, a love story, a unique twist on each, Chris Whitaker has taken a novel about what lurks in the shadows of obsession and the blinding light of hope. That sounds nothing like the book that I read.
Nope. And let's talk about our songs.
Let's talk about our song choices. So I had one that I thought of immediately, but I did deviate. The song I ended up picking is an artist that I've chosen before and is a throwback artist. There was just something about the vibes that fit really well. So I actually picked Into the Ocean by Blue October.
Okay. So my original choice I went back to is It's Nice to Have a Friend by Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's Nice to Have a Friend is criminally underrated, and I think that if the production were different, more people would like and appreciate it.
Agreed.
Like if it were on Folklore or Evermore, I think it would be a lot of people's favorites.
Mm-hmm. That's how I feel about like the whole Lover album. I feel like if these songs were on different albums, people would appreciate them a lot better.
Totally.
This next section, spoilers are ahead. So please do not continue if you are going to read this book and you don't want spoilers. But if you don't want to read the book and you just want to be here for the vibes, or you read the book and you want to hear our thoughts, please stick around.
Yes.
So for this episode, we have decided it's going to be a little bit different from our typical review structure, where we walk you through the plot and talk about our feelings along the way. There's just so much content in this story that really spans a lifetime.
Yeah. So we're still going to be discussing the plot in a linear fashion where we jump around, we'll spoil things early on, things like that. However, we're going to use questions to guide the discussion and be leaving out large chunks of the plot because it would just be more or less so bland and so dry to recount all of that. So things are going to be a little bit different if you listen to our typical episode structure. There was just, this outline was like 25 pages long before we cut it down, and that's just way too much.
Yeah. This book is the complete opposite of Ministry of Time, right? Ministry of Time, structure-wise, had 10 chapters, super long, with flashbacks, and then this one had over 260 chapters that were short and sweet. How did you feel about this one? And did like the length of the chapters make the book seem shorter at all to you?
So I originally thought it would, like through the first chunk of the book, because I think this book starts out with a bang, and we'll talk about that. I think that I was hooked from the get, and then maybe around chapter like 50 or 60, I was like, no, it doesn't matter. It's like the content. It's the content that's like killing me here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice a big difference, like with the amount of chapters?
Not really. I think I told you when I was like reading it that it just kind of felt like a documentary more
Mm-hmm.
than like a true crime that I kind of want from like a thriller.
Yeah.
So it just felt like it was like episode after episode, more so like
Yeah.
little mini episodes. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It didn't really phase me.
Yeah. Did you, so talking about like the documentary style too, like how did you feel about the third person narration, how the book was like kind of laid out, and also how like the parts were split up?
I feel like the way the parts are split up kind of confused me a little bit. Where it kind of went through like the first two, like recounted those areas, and I don't know. I have feelings.
Mm-hmm. I also have feelings. Unfortunately, this is another case. So if any of you are here and you listened to our Ministry of Time episode where like I had a lot of feelings, I think that both of us are about to have a lot of feelings because the further I sit away from this book, the more I discover that I didn't like about it. So just a heads up, if you guys love this book, I love that for you. I never
Hmm.
go into a book with the goal of disliking it. Like that is
Correct.
why would I waste my time doing that? I would never want to do that. However, this was probably one of the biggest letdowns of a book I have ever read.
Yeah, and I think I can see why it like got a lot of credit the way that it did, but I just, by letting a book be a book, it's not the book for us, and that's okay.
Yeah, 100%. And like it's very slow and methodical and laid out. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, again, for me, it's like there was a lot of like flowery descriptive language that like didn't fit how jarring and how like cut and dry the narration was. So like there would just be like these like beautiful descriptions of their landscapes and stuff. And then it's literally like Patch was kidnapped. Saint had an abortion. Like it's just I don't know. It's just these like
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't add up to me. But we have so much to get through. So we're just gonna dive in to our first part, which is 1975, The Pirate and the Beekeeper. I too was confused by the way the parts were split up. I never found that it was super clear about who we were talking about, when we were talking about it. And also, there were like harsh jumps in time where we were just expected to put pieces together. And for over 600 pages, I would hope that we would have a little bit more put together for us.
Yeah. Were you hooked at the beginning of this, like the part of this story here?
Yes. So, like I was saying earlier, there was something about like the initial, like, okay, we're diving in. We have this boy named Patch McCauley. We have, he lives in the Missouri Ozarks, super poor. He wears an eye patch. His mom told him he's a pirate. Like, and just it kind of runs on that. We have the initial hit of him being bullied. He has his crush, Misty, this like super popular rich girl. We meet Saint, who's Patch's friend and a beekeeper, and like all of these very like little oddballs throughout this small town. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I wonder where we're going with this. So I personally was like in it during part one. Honestly, even through like, I think through like part two, like part one and part two, I was in. And then it just slowly went downhill for me.
Yeah. I liked Saint. I think she was like Kid Saint was probably my favorite character.
Agreed.
Just how she was like a beekeeper and she wakes up one day to realize her bees are missing and the hive's
Mm-hmm.
empty and is like immediately like somebody stole my beehive. Like
Yeah.
somebody stole the bees. And like goes on to the police station
Mm-hmm.
and that's where she runs into Misty and Misty is reporting that like what happened to her
Yeah.
and Saint realizes like Patch is in danger. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, tell me more, tell me more. And
Yeah.
so they go to the lakeside where Patch was kidnapped
Mm-hmm.
and they find a bloody t-shirt.
Yeah. And then there's a search party, and Saint, like, this consumes her whole life. So, this is the part that I thought was interesting. So, when Patch goes missing, Saint is like overwhelmed by this. And there's the way that the police handled this case is very 1975. Like, while reading it, I was frustrated with the police, but then I remembered the setting and like the time frame, and
Yeah.
it's pretty on par with anything that I've ever heard and or seen about crime in that, like, during that time. He was the poor oddball kid who did a brave thing, but no one's going out of their way to like ensure his safety.
Mhm.
Now, if Misty had been taken, the entire town would have been turned upside down.
And going back to Saint real quick, one of my
Mhm.
favorite little memories of like her and Patch, like their friendship. Saint was so excited to get her bees. She sent invitations out to all the girls and
Mhm.
nobody showed up, but like Patch shows up and he
Yeah.
stole somebody's invite and like rewrote it to himself
Mhm.
and just hung out with her and ate the honey, and they just kind of that became friends right there.
Yeah, I love their friendship. It feels like obviously they grow up and go through trauma and all of that, but like I was in it. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
these kids are so interesting. Like I haven't read anything like this.
Yeah. Misty talks to Saint after church one day, and Misty says that she does feel guilty that she's safe and Patch
Mhm.
isn't. Misty says that she wasn't in school because she was helping Dr. Toombs find his lost dog. And Saint is like, Toombs doesn't have a dog.
Yeah.
And then the police chief is like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Hmm?
What does Saint do though? She worries about it.
Of
So
course.
she goes to Toombs' house and he's covered in blood. And Chief Nick's like, oh, don't worry about it.
Everything is it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. And then another girl goes missing. So now Patch is missing. Callie Montrose is missing. At the vigil for the missing girl, another girl says that Dr. Toombs, the one that was just covered in blood, is a creep and waits outside the school. Saint, of course, is like, still suspicious of this guy, right?
Yeah.
And then Saint has another hobby, which makes me just think of like all the hobbies that I've had in my life. Like, I'll try this. Like, she's trying beekeeping. Now she's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to try photography. When she goes to the store to develop her photos from her film, she sees Misty's picture on a bulletin board and who the photographer is. And it's Eli Aaron. And the shopkeeper's like, don't mess with him. Like, I wouldn't let my daughter near him. Aaron's a school photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Sketchy.
And there's like model casting calls basically for young girls, which like if anyone grew up in like the 90s and 2000s, you know that was still very prevalent where like people would like approach you in the mall and be like, you should be a model.
Yeah.
And then they're like trying to do weird shit to you. Awful. Saint decides that she's going to go to this house herself. She's going to go to Aaron's house. And I love Saint for this. Like she's a girly determined. No one's going to tell her no. You know, she lives with her grandma Norma. It just, Patch and Saint are the weird kids in school. Like they're the kids that are isolated.
Together, yep.
And so when she became friends with him, it was like this immediate bond. So she runs into Jimmy on her way to Aaron's house and she said, I'm going to go kill Aaron and save Patch. Thank God she told Jimmy because Jimmy alerted the masses that this was happening. So she takes a bus, she gets to the house and she's like, I want to have my picture taken. And she thinks that she's going to outsmart this like serial killer. Okay, girly pop, if you want to, sure. So then she's like blind because he made her take off her glasses. She can't see anything. And immediately she's like, something is wrong. Something is wrong. He's this like big, like huge dude that just quotes the Bible and quotes a bunch of scripture. And so Saint luckily knows some. So she quotes some back and he's like, oh, you know the Bible. Like, and he talks about these like sinners and all of this weird shit. And she asks him if he took the girls. And homie said, yeah.
Yeah.
And then she tries to shoot him because, of course, she brought a gun. And she's like a 13-year-old girl. So he just takes it away. And she has a slingshot. She runs into his dark room. There's this whole like action sequence. And this, if the whole book had like promises of what happened here, this would be a very different episode. Like this, I was like, oh my God. Like, I can't wait to see how this unfolds. I can't wait to see what happens. But this all happens in like the first, I don't know. Well, there's 260 chapters. So what, let's say like 50, 60 chapters. I don't know, something like that. But it happens early and fast. And there's, in my opinion, 0 action sequences that even come close to what this is from here to the end of the book, which is insane to me.
Yeah. So when she's there, so in the dark room, she sees like photos of all the girls and like halos scratched above their heads. When she's crawling through the rooms of this house in the yard, she finds a room with caged snakes And
Mhm.
she's terrified because, of course, why wouldn't she be? She
Naturally.
lights a match and starts a fire. And she thinks she's going to die. But, of course, Jimmy lured the masses. So Chief Nix does arrive and save her and tries to take her away. And she's like, no, Patch is still there. Like, I have to save Patch. And then she runs away and like stumbles over his body and
Yeah.
finds him.
Were you also like into this part? Like, did this hook you too, or did you also have like a little wishy-washy from the beginning?
I was hooked, but I was also like, is this happening already?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it felt very quick. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then we're gonna kind of maybe go into some more action, but
Yeah. Yeah, then we get to our next part, which is 1975, The Lovers, the Dreamers. And this was a really short part, but this is where Patch awakens in captivity, and it kind of goes like it's like a little flashback to how Patch is feeling. Now, Patch is talking to a girl named Grace when he's in captivity. Did you believe Grace was real? Because they spend the majority of the book convincing Patch that she's a figment of his imagination.
I believe she was real.
Mm-hmm.
So, spoiler for another book, but we
It's
read.
hardly a spoiler. It was right at the
True, it was
beginning.
right at the beginning. But so at the beginning of Local Woman Missing,
Yes.
one of the girls is in captivity and has, like, there's somebody else with her, and we find out that they were a figment of her imagination.
Yes.
And so just the way that, like, Grace was described versus, I can't remember the boy's name, but versus the other boy that was mentioned,
yes.
Grace felt real to me.
I agree. Because in Local Woman Missing, comparatively, it was like, he would hide in the shadows when they came downstairs. He was away from this. But Patch with Grace, like, Grace left the room and came back with food for them.
Yeah.
I always felt like Grace was real. And to kind of jump off of that, did you have an inkling, because Grace had special privileges over Patch, who was also being held captive according to, his recollection.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have an inkling of who she might have been, or like anything with that?
No.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it that much.
Yeah, I don't think I like fully guessed what it was, but I was like, something has to be going on there for her to be able to do those things. But beyond that, like, we didn't spend a whole lot of time here.
Yeah, and I mean, because Grace would like tell him stories and try to teach him things, so it made it feel like she was, like, I thought she was real based on their conversations they had.
I agree.
Like, it wasn't just him trying to comfort himself, which I feel like that's where, like, the figment of his imagination would come from.
Yep.
So Patch, like, tries to free himself with, like, trying to, like, get a loose brick from the wall and tries to hit Aaron with it. And Aaron's this big monstrous guy and is like, that's not going to work. So he, like, beats Patch and it's, like, bruises a rib and punctures a lung and all of this stuff. Grace comforts him, and Patch doesn't remember the fire or his rescue or Grace disappearing, anything like that. Doesn't remember anything.
That takes us into our next part. So we're at 1976, The Painter now. And this is like, I wish I could go ahead.
Quick. So Patch was really only, like, he was taken for 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I would have liked the book if that part was longer. Because that is a long search time, and it just felt so like he'd been gone for a month. I
genuinely forgot until you just said that how long he was gone for.
Almost a year.
Like, and yeah, it just like nothing. It was like, okay, Saint is sad and she's looking for him. No one else seems to be looking for him. His mom is withering away, and there's no one like to take care of Saint or take care of his mom. And I just, I mean, how far into the book?
120 pages.
Into a 600-page book.
Is what we just went over, yeah.
The bulk of the story, there's literally no action. There's none. If this would have been a 120-page short story, I probably would have been on board.
Yep.
Give me another 20 pages to explain it. Call it a day. Guys, I don't know. I don't want to shit on this. Like, I feel so bad because I know people love this book, but I, like, looking at our outline, thinking about it, I was typing out questions, and I was like, I don't even know what to say because I didn't connect with any of the characters, like, besides Saint, but that was Saint as a kid. Which leads me into one of my questions, was actually to you, did the kids' language and their dialogue feel authentic to you for their age?
No.
Because
I
that,
kept having to remind myself that they were like 13.
and even in this next, like, even when it jumps time into the next part when Patch leaves school and, starts working, they're 16.
Yeah.
And the way that they speak to each other, I'm like, this is, I don't care if it's 1976. Like, I know children never spoke like this.
Yeah. I'm looking at the back of the book.
Mhm.
The author lives in the United Kingdom and is writing about the Missouri Ozarks.
Maybe that's why, because I had no recollection. Like, I could not, I am a vivid, like, I have a vivid imagination. When I read things, I can see it in 4K HD. I can build my reality inside of my head. If you've listened at all, Hannah and I always talk about things in the form of films and movies and stuff like that. I had nothing. I could not picture any of this place.
No. Yeah.
I don't know.
And so the police, they just assume that Aaron died in the fire.
What a great
There's
assumption
no leads.
for a serial killer.
Yeah.
It's just, instead
They
of
assume his name is
searching,
an alias.
but then they do nothing else.
They do nothing else. Patch is still hung up on Grace and is like, hey, Chief Nix, like, we gotta find Grace. And people are like, no, don't worry. She's a figment of your imagination. Like, let's just cope with your trauma. Saint receives an award. Like, police, you could have just done the same thing.
Yep.
But anyway, Patch does have a history. So we mentioned it earlier that his mom calls him a pirate. And he does have a history of, like, stealing things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he stole the invitation to go to, like, the little beehive thing. He steals his neighbor's car to get to the library, and Saint, like, tries to cover it up. So she, like, tries to protect Patch that way.
Mm-hmm.
And Patch realizes that, his mom's behind on all these bills. They don't have any money, and mom is not able to work. And so he steps in for her custodian job, and that's where he meets Sammy.
What was your vibe with Sammy?
I don't know how to describe it. Like, I feel like Sammy was supposed to be this, like, big pivotal character, and he felt like a very minor side character to me. Like,
He felt like,
I don't know, I just didn't connect with that.
Like, he, in my opinion, was supposed to be a supplement for some sort of father figure in Patch's life, right? To me, he came across as a, like, caricature of, like, this archetypal type of character where he almost, like, godfathered him in a way. Like, he almost made him this, like, scary, like, mafia boss type energy, and, like, none of it connected to me. Like, he felt like, not to use the word patch, but he felt like a patchwork makeup of a bunch of different characteristics into one character that was supposed to serve the role of, like, multiple people. Yeah, so with Sammy, and Sammy catches Patch stealing all of this stuff, and I also think it's very bizarre that he was taking on these jobs for his mom. I know it's again in the 70s, so maybe I'm just, like, overthinking, some of this stuff. And obviously he was doing it illegally and, like, sneaking around. But, like, I know that you have to become resourceful, like, as someone in Patch's position. I just didn't think, like, logistically or logically he could have made that actually work, between how he got there, actually accomplishing these tasks appropriately, like, through the agency, and, like, I don't know. But Sammy, like, takes him in, and Sammy basically, like we said, becomes this weird overarching, like, father figure that takes care of him but also holds like debts over his head, and then utilizes Patch's talents to, like, pursue his ventures in his art gallery, which I take big issue with. And I do think that's part of, obviously, the story here. Like, everyone here is pretty much like a morally gray version of a human, and there's a bunch of faults and flaws, and I understand what the purpose of the story was. The purpose of the story was to show how hope and grief and guilt can drive people beyond their wildest imaginations to, like, extend years down their life to do crazy things in the name of love, in the name of others, in the name of justice. I just, like, I get what it was trying to do, but no character in this accomplished even a fraction of that for me, besides Saint. Like, Saint's character arc was the only one that, like, I was like, okay, like, I can see this. I'm here for this.
Yeah. So Patch is very consumed with finding all these missing girls and finding Grace. Like, trying to find not so much finding the missing girls, but trying to find if any of these missing girls are his Grace.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he is so consumed with that. And Misty and Patch form this bond because I don't know if we actually said it. Maybe I just blocked it out. But did we say how Patch got kidnapped?
I don't think we did because I don't think we
'Cause
actually went into it.
Yeah, because he was. So, rewind, we'll start at the beginning. So, Patch was walking and he hears like Misty and, Eli Aaron fighting almost. And he like steps in and like save her. So, he ends up getting kidnapped and Misty runs away. So, that's why Misty felt guilty. And so, Misty does protect him against a bully at school. And they just kind of have this bond now. He does go to dinner with Misty's family. Saint helps him get ready because remember, Misty is a rich, popular girl. And Patch is not a rich, popular girl. And so when he goes to dinner, it's like very awkward with his family. Mm-hmm. And Patch like tells Misty after dinner, like, yo, we're in different worlds. Like, this is not gonna work. Yeah, we just get more of like the... like Sammy just kind of like almost buying Patch's love, right? Like buys him new clothes, buys him all these art supplies, and just kind of goes on. And finally he's like, Patch, we're taking this painting, stop obsessing over it. And it's like called Grace Number 1. And it's just like many paintings of Grace that he does. And then Misty comes by and tells Patch, nobody looks at me the way you do. And of course, Patch is infatuated with her because she's the rich, popular girl and is like, oh my gosh, no color could ever
paint this
girl. Her. Yeah.
And also, he had a crush on her, like, from the get-go. So, like, him saving his crush, the little one-eyed child, how cute. Knowing what you know now, do you think that they had a genuine connection, those two? Correct.
Mm-mm.
I don't know if they were supposed to be honest. I think maybe they just weren't. If they were supposed to, I was not convinced in any way, shape, or form. Even later on, specifically. I have a lot of feelings about how their story unfolded.
So Misty has a birthday party. I know you made a comment that this is one of the times that you laughed in the book is when Saint was getting ready for the party and her grandma Norma's friend that does makeup at the funeral parlor helps Saint get ready.
Yes.
I know. What a fun thing. But then at the party, we realized that Misty only wanted Saint to come because she thought Patch was going to show up. And Saint's like, Misty, don't take Patch from me. Like, he's all I have and blah, blah, blah. And then Patch shows up. And of course, Misty's like, oh, Patch. And then Jimmy's there and is like, yo, Saint, you wanna go on a dance? And then Misty tells Patch the wish for her birthday was to dance with the boy who saved her life.
And like, also too, Jimmy was very much, I never liked Jimmy because he's like, oh, I know I'm not your first choice, but I'm here if you want to see me. And I'm just like, ew. Like, if she wanted you, she would, but now you've like pressured her and cornered her, and you're using her like emotions in regards to Patch and Misty to like usurp this moment. Never liked Jimmy.
No, not
ever. But then we jump ahead again, and now we're in 1978 now. It's called The Broken Hearts, and we've skipped more time. Patch takes a job at the mines. He leaves school. He's dating Misty.
Yeah, 'cause this is like 2 years later.
And like, this is where I also struggled because like we see the fallout and how it happens like over the course of his life, but like that immediate time after he was taken and like trying to rebuild himself and all of that, like I wish we would have seen more of like the town trying to rebuild after like such a tragedy and the focus on actually finding the serial killer. I know they presumed he was dead, but like I think this is categorized technically as like a historical mystery or like a mystery / historical fiction. There was nothing mysterious about this to me. Like none of the grand reveals, none of the like time jumps. I was just more so confused. I wasn't like surprised in that way that you hope to be surprised in like a mystery or a suspense or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. And with this too, in this time period, Patch has been, trying to find his grace. So he goes to these families and like finds out who the daughter is of the missing girl. And then he'll come back and paint the girl, and Samuel send it to the families. And normally the families love the painting, but there's one, Callie, and Callie's father sends the painting back. He refuses it. And Sammy does hold a show to sell some of Patch's paintings, and Patch like doesn't like that idea. Throughout the whole book, he's like, no, I'm not selling this. Like, it's a passion for him. Like, he's not doing it to make money.
Yeah, it's like healing his trauma and trying to connect with like these lost girls and all of that stuff. And that's what I really disliked about that part of the plot. And again, I think some of this is by design. I think that we're not supposed to enjoy that. I think it's supposed to be like a, hey, this is a not right thing. And I think that I could have appreciated those things more if everything around it was built better.
Yeah.
Is that what I want to say?
Yeah, I just feel like if Patch was down and low as much as he was, like selling a couple paintings would be an easy way out.
Like, I understand the emotional ties to it, but like, so I'm gonna kind of like, I don't know, not necessarily jump ahead, but just talk about Patch like throughout. So I did not believe that Patch's character, the actions that he took, would have led him down the path that he was led down. I think that some of his actions made sense to me. The potentially being in and out of prison, doing things inappropriately, all of that stuff. But like, not like you said, like the paintings, like not all of them were emotionally, like he wasn't emotionally tied to them. He like created these emotional ties by connecting all of them back to Grace. And like, I don't know, I just the bank robberies, the odd behaviors, we'll talk about Charlotte down the line here, but the way that like he just lied to Charlotte and said that he would always take care of her and then didn't follow through on that, even though that felt like the only like shred of hope that would tie him back to Misty and all of this stuff. I don't know. I didn't believe where the story went. Yeah. And maybe that's because I didn't have, in my mind, a solid picture painted for me of where the book wanted me to go.
Yeah, that's fair. But then it's prom. They're still in high school. Saint does go to prom with Jimmy, but abandons prom and goes to Tomb's house because she did find like evidence of his prescription refills around the time that Patch went missing and found out that he had like sleeping pills. So she's still very suspicious of Tombs. Chief Nix, is always there. I feel like every time that she's trying to confront Tombs, he's like, let's go. Like, let's go back. And she's like, nope. Jumps out of the car, runs back to Tombs land, and there's a little cellar. And she finds a bloody mattress there, which is wild. Like, that's when I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Tombs. Interesting. Poor Patch literally gets offered a check from Misty's father to break up with her, and so that she will go to Harvard and have a future. Patch says bye and leaves her sobbing in the front of her yard.
Yeah. And like, I understand this because even from the beginning, he told Misty they were like from two different worlds, and to have that consistently reaffirmed by the people that are surrounding Misty and in her life, and like having to fight for approval that he never thought he was going to get. Like, yeah. I understand that. But yeah, I thought that was interesting, and kind of goes along the lines of like the social commentary of if you are from two, not just different worlds, like those two were basically from two different planets, like the way that they were raised, the way that they behave, their thought processes, all of that, especially in that time where we don't necessarily have more to bridge our gaps. And like, there's just this kind of thought of like, well, you live one way, I live another way. I never thought that they would actually make it out alive together. Like, no. But then we move 4 years ahead to Cops and Robbers, and we find out that Saint is now a police officer. She's working under Nix for the Montclair police force, and Toombs is now in prison for the murder of Callie Montrose, though he pled not guilty. And the blood in his house matched Callie's blood. Some of his hair was found in Eli Aaron's house, and the assumption was that he was supplying Aaron basically with all of these pills that would sedate or subdue the girls that he would take, and he was sentenced to death over this. They're just like unsure about what Toombs's motive could have been in this case. Like, it just didn't make sense to them. But were you surprised at all by this, like, line of work for Saint? Like, we just jump ahead and all of a sudden she's a police officer. Did
Yeah,
that make sense to you?
it didn't make sense to me.
Hmm.
As we went on, it made sense, but like right
Yeah.
away, it felt very dramatic. Like
Yeah.
very like jump scare course for her.
Yeah.
But as like I feel like in her adult life, the more she does kind of do her research and passion about it, it made sense.
Yes. I just think, so the one thing that I struggled with, and I think I did write the question here, yeah. So the connection to the missing girls for Patch and Saint are obviously super strong from when they were kids, but did you believe it was strong enough for them to sustain a whole life and a whole plot like this?
Definitely not for Saint.
No, because I know that Saint had the fear would, like, she was about to become one of the girls and she went looking for Patch, but she found Patch, and the person that she lost was the piece of Patch that was left behind after he was captured, and taken. But, like, how does that tie into, like, the vigilante type justice that,
Yeah.
like, takes them through? I think because, so this actually makes me, like, think back to our other, like, third person POV book that we recently read, which was All the Sinners Bleed. And this actually gave me, like, a very strong newfound respect for how well that third person story was told. And I think that, given now having read this, like, I would go back and raise my rating on that book, because I still think about that book and I still think about those characters, and I felt connections to those characters.
Yes.
And I look at this, and these are in what I would consider the same type of category. This leans more like literary fiction, but even still, third person POV, telling a story over time, mystery, murder, all of this stuff. And there was just no one, especially at this point in the book, that I genuinely cared about.
Yeah.
I did not care about any of these people. Like, Saint was the only one that I, like, cared this much about. And the pieces of her that I liked as a child, I lost when she went into adulthood.
Yeah. And so, like, the robber side of things is Patch just goes about robbing banks here and there. And
But
leaves, like...
he's a nice robber.
Yeah. Unloaded guns, donates money to charities. He, like, leaves rambling messages for Saint.
Robin Hood. Like...
Yeah.
Okay, Robin Hood. I get it.
And then Saint is dating Jimmy.
Of course she is.
And her grandma does disapprove of Saint's career. So I'm like, all right, at least Grandma Norma has some sense in her a little bit.
Well, kind of, but then Grandma Norma was like, you don't need love in a relationship.
Exactly.
You need, respect and stability will come.
Right.
You just need the stability, and then the love, the respect, like, you can figure all that shit out later.
Yep.
And I know they're in the Ozarks and she probably doesn't talk like that, but that's what I imagined she spoke like in my head.
I could see that. So Jimmy is studying to be a veterinarian, works at the zoo. Really, Saint is still hung up on this whole Eli Aaron and Dr. Toombs case. Like, she is just so hung up on it.
And I can see why. Like, why it was written in the story like that, why she was written like that. But, like, was there enough to be, like, that hung up on? And maybe it is, like, because in theory, that's the case that, like, took her, swayed her into this line of work that, she took onto her heart, she connected with it. As a reader, I just didn't.
Patch, so he went from being a robber to, like, going to New England, working on lobster boats, and meets with Sammy in a couple different places in Washington, D.C., and they kind of talk about how the paintings are selling and all of this stuff. And one night, he is at a bar, and he sees a, like, rich college kid harassing a woman, and it turns out to be Misty. And he punches the man, saves Misty once again, since he is out there working on his lobster boat, and she's at Harvard. And they share a romantic evening walking through Boston. He's still amazed at how beautiful and smart she is, and is like, you're still better off without me. But they have a brief night of passion. And
as one does.
Right. And he does leave behind a quick stencil sketch a quick pencil sketch of Misty sleeping. And this is where, like you said, Norma turns the opposite of the coin and is like, you need to marry Jimmy. Like,
Yeah.
and so Saint's like, I guess so. Like, who else am I gonna marry? You know, she's still holding out for Patch. Like, you know, just wants that. But Patch does show up and they share a moment. He is, you know, happy for Saint. But then they part ways.
They go away.
Yep.
Saint and Nix meet, you know, after the wedding, and he basically is like, why didn't you just take your honeymoon? Like, blah, blah, blah. She's like, well, we didn't take one. And, you know, she tells Nix that love isn't important, and he disagrees. And then all of a sudden, the FBI has called, and they want her to come work with them in Kansas City.
And Jimmy's like, no, don't take the job, girl. She's like, well, going anyway. And Jimmy refuses to speak to her when she leaves.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI agent offers her like an assignment with them and shows her a new body that was found of a young girl who was buried with rosary beads. And he tells her that they can help her track down Eli Aaron if she helps them find a bank robber. And this bank robber uses an antique pistol to rob banks. And she recognizes that it's Patch.
Yep. Yeah, Jimmy is a little pissy boy, little pissy man. Can't take the fact that his woman wants to work, and I thought his behavior was immediately a red flag. Like I said, I didn't like him from the beginning, but this,
Yep.
I was like, something is gonna go wrong here. Like, he just wasn't great. But we move forward another year. Now it's the hunt, and Saint's working with the FBI during the week, returning home on the weekends. Jimmy sucks and failed his veterinary exams. How could you, Jimmy? And he spends his days just drinking on the couch, blaming Saint for his absence and failure, blah, blah, blah. Just another mediocre man, blaming his shit on a woman.
Right.
And Patch ends up calling her, and they speak briefly, and he tells her that he is a pirate, she is a lawman, and they can no longer meet each other. So she, you know, continues to chase him and eventually returns home. So I guess my thing is, like, what did you think about the pirate theme running throughout it? Like, I was so into it when they were younger, but I feel like it fell flat to me as they got older. Did you feel the same, or do you feel like it came full circle, especially knowing the ending?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it came full circle to an extent. I was into it when he was a kid, and then I feel like they didn't mention it for a while.
Yeah.
And then when it came back again, I'm like, oh. In this time frame too, we find out that Saint is pregnant, and she does go to an abortion clinic like 200 miles away from home. And she notices a photograph from the clinic's opening, and Dr. Toombs is in the picture, which
Can I know we just said that we need to rush, like, get through this. This book had too many coincidental happenstances that took place so far away from each other that it made it so severely unrealistic to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, please continue.
But so Saint, you know, gets called to go into the appointment. And side note, we don't find this out till later, but she does not go through with the abortion.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know that at this time. She does go home and tells Jimmy, and she's about to like tell him that she didn't go through with it, but she's like, oh, I went to the clinic, and he like beats her, and just, yep, solidifying that we don't like Jimmy. And she like immediately returns to Kansas City because she doesn't want anybody to see the bruises or, you know, just the shape that she's in from Jimmy, like the piece of shit he is. Then she has an epiphany about the case when she goes back to Kansas City. And she's like, Patch is visiting places that Grace described to him. And which then he rambles on in his voicemails. And she catches up to Patch in Arizona, and he's like furious that, you know, she has these bruises and hears that Jimmy hurt her. And she just shrugs it off, and she like begs him not to leave, and he's like, peace.
And when he says peace, she fires her gun. That's what we got from that part. But we do find out later that she hit him in the thigh non-lethally. And then we jump ahead 7 years. 7 years.
Yep.
And Patch is released from prison, and Saint picks him up. And she wrote him, but he never let her come visit.
Nope.
He moves back into his old house, tries to settle into his old life, seeing Sammy and Saint a lot. One day, though, he sees a little girl stealing at a candy bar, and she curses at him, but he helps her perfect her technique. Which is, that did feel a very like Patch thing to do.
Mm.
Then outside of the store, he sees Misty and he's shocked. Now, 7 years down the line, Saint gets forensic techs to search the Tombs house using the newfound technique of DNA in hopes of finding Grace. So, we're in the stages where this technology is slowly being rolled out and they're slowly starting to, retest things and do all of this stuff. Patch walks through the house with her. He says that he is sure he was never there and Grace wasn't either. So that kind of like eliminates that as like a secondary location or something like that. But basically we find out Misty and Patch have dinner. There's a whole thing that her father died. She left college, moved home. Um, the two of them reconcile. Patch, talks about being unable to paint, life in prison, all of this stuff. They strike up a friendship, spending time together as he works at a gallery. Saint works on the case with Aaron's victims, trying to piece all of that together. Patch ends up having a movie date with Misty. He's still painting like girls, and they're gifting the paintings to families and, trying to, in hopes that like they can connect pieces of the puzzle. And she basically is like, they need to stop Misty and Saint because like she can't head there any longer. And he accepts this, but basically when he sees the young girl from the store window with Misty, he has this like aha moment of like, oh shit, that's our daughter. Like that's our child.
Mm-hmm.
So Misty introduces him to Charlotte. What did you think about Charlotte as a character and as a plot point?
I wasn't a fan.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the connection back to Misty. Like I was hoping that we were just kind of done with that Misty storyline.
Yeah.
And for it to come back and we find out that Misty's sick and
yes,
she dies soon after. And then Charlotte's left in Patch's custody.
Yeah.
What
and
were
like
your thoughts with that?
She is, volatile. She's a little angry, understandably so. Basically tells Patch like he'll never be her father, goes through like that struggle there. I hated it. I hated that she not only got past a Patch, who like was super ill prepared and didn't really want to be a father, also who like just, I know he tried his best, but like just basically passed her off to grandma whenever he could.
Yeah.
And like he was just not built for it. And then this poor girl gets shipped off again when her dad does stupid shit again to Saint. And then Saint, I hated that Saint never found happiness because she was tied to this vigilante justice pirate man who, like, from when she was 13 years old, like, this is what didn't make sense to me, is that from childhood, she, like, never let it go. And I know she was with Jimmy for that period of time, but, like, Saint found happiness at the end, I guess, with Charlotte. Like, they figured shit out, but, like, I feel like she found nothing. I feel like nothing, she got nothing out of it. I did not like the side plot. I didn't like the refocus on Misty. I didn't even like their friendship with each other because it just felt like one big trauma bond from the years. And also, too, what really bothered me was that Patch basically was like, he looked at Charlotte and said, the room that has her in it now holds his heart. And by doing that, that means that he now lost Grace. And I'm like, did that girl really hold? Like, again, I know it was 10 months in the formative years, and I'm sure there's some psychology behind this, but like, I just think that like the fact that he had to get rid of Grace to make room for Charlotte was odd. And he didn't actually do that. He didn't actually make room for Charlotte.
No, he did not.
Charlotte was crass, crass, brash, over the top, which I understand that she was also Patch's child, but the way that she was raised with Misty and Misty's mom, her behavior didn't compute to me. Like, it wouldn't make sense that she was like that off the get-go. It made sense that she would grow into that with Patch. I don't know. But we're 5 years into the future again.
Saint's still caught up on all this, right? Trying to find the, more stuff with the Aaron Toombs case and that connection. She goes to this town that was mentioned on some of the tapes that Patch left her. She finds a church and realizes that all the nuns carry the same rosary that were on the girls that Aaron killed.
Dun dun dun.
And so she speaks to an older nun, and who recognizes Aaron as a troubled altar boy named Robert Peter Frederick. And another nun tells him that a man came by and bought a set of the beads recently and recognized Aaron in the photo. And so, of course, Saint and the FBI agent are like, what? Aaron isn't dead and he's going to kill again.
Mm-hmm.
Dun, dun, dun. He's still out there.
Yep.
And so they do go to the zoo for Charlotte's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And they go see the snakes, and Patch is immediately like triggered. And we know from like early on that there was like snakes kept at the property where Patch was taken, like at. And so he like passes out. He like stirs to in a back room, who none other than our boy Jimmy is the zookeeper veterinarian.
Of course.
And Jimmy insults Saint, and Patch is like, F you. And yep, the chapter ends, and we open up the next chapter with Patch in prison, and we find out that Jimmy died.
Yep. And this is another 3-year jump, by the way. And so he's been there for over a year, spends his days working in the prison library. Cooper, the librarian, is a brother of one of the missing girls who Patch helped. And it's just like this stuff is revealed like super slowly over time. Patch has a meeting with the warden to allow him to bring library books to death row. And he's surprised to see a painting of him hanging in the warden's office. At death row, Patch finally sees the person he's been trying to speak to, Marty Toombs, and he's trying to find out what happened with Grace. And then all of a sudden, Saint is now the chief of police because Nix is retired, and she left the FBI, but she stays afloat with the Aaron case, and she struggles to raise Charlotte. She feels inadequate, especially because the town blames her for what happened to Jimmy, because, of course, the town blames her for what happened to Jimmy. Charlotte gets in trouble for hurting a boy who groped her, and Saint teaches her self-defense, and Patch continues to talk to Marty, gets no answer. He tries to stay out of prison fights, and he's friendly with everyone. He's friendly with this guard named Blackjack. Norma, too, with Saint, basically tells her that she would have an easier time with Charlotte if she had stayed with Jimmy, and she accuses Saint of driving Jimmy away. Saint wants to tell her what actually happened and how Jimmy beat her, and she just can't bring herself to do it. Charlotte stays out too late on a date. Saint finds her, they fight, and it's just this like cyclical fight that happens between Charlotte and Saint, and then what happened with Charlotte and Patch, and just these like little pieces of life. And then Charlotte accuses Saint of killing her baby, and we find out the truth of what happened. And there's also a quote that I tabbed this for a reason. Now that you're opening your book, that reminded me. And this actually does still go like in line with this. And they talk about like in the book they talk about mistakes and everything here, but I did have a quote when I heard it. I was like, yeah, that's the one. And I think this book is about like atoning for your past mistakes, reconciling the things that you've done wrong, also trying to make things right. And there's a quote that says, she talks about how we construct our ideals out of our own past mistakes. And I wonder what exactly a mistake is. A thing we should not have done, right? But if learning is built on trial and error, there can be no mistakes, only rungs on a ladder to someplace better.
That has stuck with me this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
If I get nothing out of this book, it has put that mindset like in place for me. And it's like such a great way to think of things.
And that reminded me, it triggered when you open your book too, but also the way that Saint changes her approach with Charlotte when she decides to just tell her what happened, because she had so many mistakes, leading up to it, so many mistakes that she, felt like she didn't tell Norma, being with Jimmy, just so many errors and stuff. But I loved that thought process of like, everyone is only living one life, and like you're going to make these mistakes, and you can just keep climbing the ladder and hoping that it's going to get you to someplace better, because how are you going to learn if you don't make any mistakes?
Mm-hmm.
That was super like out of place because that happened in chapter 64, but it just like, I just remembered it. So that's where it's going right now.
Yeah, no, good call, because I do like that quote.
Yeah.
How did you feel about, like, Toombs not giving information up? Like, did you feel that made him more complicit or more guilty?
Okay. Toombs bothered me. I did not understand. We'll just talk about it. So, Toombs didn't actually do it, right? Toombs was providing illegal abortions to young girls who were scared, couldn't get one, were underage, all of this stuff without the consent of their parents, which is why he had DNA, he had the bloody mattress, he had all of this stuff. And he said that he would rather face death row than breach the confidentiality of those women and of those, patients and stuff like that, which I thought was an interesting take and was like too noble for an everyday person.
Um,
And the fact that he would not give any other information, because there were ways for him to give information without saying specifically what he did.
mm-hmm.
And I think him withholding it made him appear more complicit and more guilty.
Yeah, agreed. Fast forward to, like, after Saint and Charlotte have this little fight, they look for Charlotte because Charlotte, like, runs off after Saint tells her that, like, Jimmy used to beat her.
Mm-hmm.
And they find Charlotte at home watching this broadcast about how a girl was found because of one of Patch's paintings. The girl that was found is Eloise Strike, whose brother is Cooper, who is a librarian at Patch's prison.
Yes.
So Saint, like, tells Charlotte Patch hurt Jimmy because he was abusive. Then Grandma Norma has a heart attack. In prison, Patch continues to visit Toombs and still pressing him, getting no answers. And Toombs tells him about his first love, and the person he describes resembles former police chief Nix.
Mm-hmm.
And Toombs' execution is scheduled in 2 weeks.
Yes.
So, like, that's coming up quick. So Grandma Norma does pass away, and while at the funeral, Saint does get a call from one of the sisters at the church saying that Aaron came back to the church to buy some rosaries. And they get plates from his using surveillance video, because remember, we're in the 90s now, so we've upgraded our technology.
Yep.
They get plates from the van and find him in Miami. In Miami, he's taken a young woman. So Saint does reach her in time. She doesn't catch Aaron, but she does save the woman's life. Patch ends up in solitary confinement because part of his, like, induction into the prison is to be abused by this gang, and so he kind of fights back, and so ends up in solitary. And he does talk to this guy named Tom through the bars. The painting in the warden's office is Grace Falls, Alabama.
Yep. Sammy also leaves a letter to Toombs and says, like, it was a privilege to know him, and he still has time to do one more good thing. Saint and Charlotte clear the land behind the house for a studio for Charlotte's art, because she takes after Patch in that regard. They discover some bones buried deep in the soil, but they later find out that those were animal bones, not human bones. And then Saint receives a call that Richie Montrose has been murdered. He was shot in his living room. On the table next to him was a letter saying that they would see Richie in hell. And it is the letter that Toombs wrote, which Nix delivered. And he was seen on security cameras entering Richie's house. Saint goes to arrest him. He doesn't resist. Moving forward, Patch orchestrates an escape from prison somehow. The pirate becomes, I don't know, he's in prison break now. Cooper pretends to be held hostage in the library. Blackjack doesn't recognize Patch. They help him get out. A fellow inmate helps as well. And then Himes from the FBI calls Saint, asks her to search the lead. But in doing so, first, she finds Charlotte, tells her the news that her dad escaped prison. And then Charlotte and Saint finally apologize for the fight that they had a long time ago. She said that she's never come first with her father, which is correct. That is absolutely correct. It's always been about Grace.
Yep.
The FBI questions the prisoners, and they throw them off the scent by saying that Patch had a girlfriend in North Dakota that he was going to. Patch makes his way to Grace Falls, Alabama, and Saint begins to piece together the mystery somehow. After all this time, it's all coming together now. I imagine the Celine Dion, like, it's all coming back to me now. So she realizes that Toombs was actually telling the truth about looking for a dog, because those animal bones were a dog in the backyard area labeled Scout. And she realizes that her bees killed the dog, and Grandma buried it secretly, not wanting to upset her. Cool. Saint interviews Cooper, realizes his connection to Pat. She interviews the construction workers who cuts the prison's electric lines, sees that Patch also painted his daughter. She visits Nix's home, which he left to her, finds all of his old photos, sees photos of him and Toombs together, realizes that they were lovers. And then there's a letter with her name on it that's telling her that Toombs is innocent and Toombs is due to be executed. So she calls all of her contacts trying to stay the execution. Hello, help, please help. He's innocent. Someone send help. I'm going manic now. I just want to be done. And she drives to the prison, almost doesn't make it in time. She fires her gun into the air, pew, 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 to force people to pay attention and let her inside. Toombs and Saint sit together after the stay of execution. They go over the facts of what happened and everything is out in the open. He explains that he saw Aaron hanging around the girls and went to his house to warn him off. That's why his DNA was all over the house. Aaron told him he was watching him and knew that he was performing illegal abortions. So that's what happened with all of that. That Saint found Toombs with blood on his hands. Callie had just died from a hemorrhage from the abortion that he was performing. So sad.
So sad.
Nix did not know that Toombs had been breaking the law, but understood why he did it, refused to call the police, and they buried Callie in her garden, safe from disturbance.
Yep. And so Toombs sent the letter to Richie, Callie's dad, hoping to let him know that he hadn't gone away entirely and someone who knew what he had done. Because Callie was getting an abortion because her father raped her.
Yep. And so now that Richie is dead,
yeah, because because Toombs didn't realize that Nix would kill Richie.
Yes.
But Nix was like, well, Toombs is dying. What do I have to live for? Might as well get this over with.
Yep. After all that goes down, Patch is eating at a diner in Grace Falls, describes the house where he wants to go, and the waitress tells him where it is. And it's very similar to his own madhouse. It's falling apart. And they call Saint because they're tipped off of where he is. The Alabama state troopers are coming, so she rushes to find the house first. They go door to door in Grace Falls. Question the diner waitress, but she claims to never have seen Patch. Interesting. Grace is real. Grace is there. And she explains that basically she begged Aaron, who we find out is her father.
Yep.
And begged him to let them stay in the house because she hoped Patch would find her. Now, she wants him to leave because she's afraid that he's going to be killed by Aaron. And he is shocked to realize that Aaron is her father. This reveal to me, I think this was supposed to be the big grand reveal of it all. Everything with Nix and Toombs and the abortions and all of this stuff. But either reading it back, it sounds dramatic. But the way that it was delivered was Toombs said this and did this. Saint did this. This person did this. Callie died and was buried.
Yeah.
That's how the information was delivered, and I feel like it didn't pack a punch. I don't even think it packed a poke. I think it was just here it is. But Saint finds the house, enters the red barn at the back of the property, and she's struck by the dark room smell. And she sees a picture of herself at 13. Draws her gun. Aaron overpowers her, but Patch to the rescue again. Our little pirate boy as an adult is saving the day because then he shoots Aaron in the head and kills him and saves Saint. And Saint and Patch embrace. She lets him go, understanding they've done the right thing even if it's outside of the law. And she promises to take care of Grace and Charlotte. And then we move 3 years ahead again to our final portion.
Yep. And so the FBI does start a nationwide investigation into Aaron's murders, which span 17 states, which is insane. And Patch is on the run. Nobody knows where he's at. And so Sammy sells some paintings. He gives the money to Toombs. Well, he buys the property, Nix's property, to give to Toombs that was about to go into foreclosure to the bank. And also gives money to Grace to fix up her house. Mm-hmm. And Sammy has a romance with Misty's mom that was supposed to happen way back when. They were star-crossed lovers, right? Almost. Mm-hmm. And this is where we get the reveal too that Saint didn't have an abortion.
Yes.
And so she goes to see her son Theodore. She doesn't want to meet him, but she does give one of Patch's paintings to his adopted mom. Mm-hmm. And a box of letters and photos. Theodore, her son, keeps bees, which is just a little connection. And Charlotte and Saint are just kind of living happily ever after together. They settled in life together, and Charlotte started painting and helping Sammy around the gallery, and plans to go to Harvard like her mom, and wants to study law. After one of the shows at the gallery, they return home. They find a jar of purple honey on the porch. And Saint's like, it's a message from Patch. And so they take a cross-country road trip to find this missing pirate. And so when they go to the honey farm, there's no trace of him, but they see a bumper sticker with a pirate on it. And they're like, oh, where's that from? And they're like, oh, OBX, Outer Banks, where the famous Blackbeard hid out. And so they journey down to the shore, and they see Patch on a sailboat.
Yep.
He shows Saint a painting, and it's the first one he painted, and it's them as children, the pirate and the beekeeper. And that's it. Were you satisfied? Were you satisfied with this ending?
No. I thought it was so dumb. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, he escaped from prison, and now he lives on a pirate ship in the Outer Banks. And I'm sure he's still on the run. He's doing all of that, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's implied. But, like, no.
I wanted to like this book so bad.
Me too. I have people that I follow, like, on Goodreads, on TikTok, on Instagram, that 5 stars, life-changing book, one of the best books they've ever read. I wanted to like it. I don't want to waste that much of my time and not like it. But here we are. Do you have any final thoughts about All the Colors of the Dark before we talk about our song choices?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
I don't know what I'm going to rate this book.
No. Let's talk about our songs.
Let's talk about our songs. As a refresher, I picked Into the Ocean by Blue October, and even though I didn't like the book, I love this song, and I think the song fits the book really, really well. Into the Ocean is a song about grief and losing yourself and a struggle with life, and it's from the lead singer's perspective of like the very dark times that he had gone through, but it is very parallel to a lot of the things that we have here. So it starts by saying, I'm just a normal boy that sank when I fell overboard. My ship would leave the country, but I'd rather swim ashore. Without a life vest, I'd be stuck again. Wish I was much more masculine. Maybe then I could learn to swim like 14 miles away. And just that initial like fell overboard. My ship would leave the country, but I'd rather swim ashore. I would be stuck without a life vest, which I was more masculine. Like all of that is like Patch's childhood. Just this like these wishing, wanting to be normal, not fitting in, being a pirate, living that pirate life. But it says, now floating up and down, I spin, colliding into sound, like whales beneath me diving down. I'm sinking to the bottom of my everything that freaks me out. The lighthouse beam has just run out. I'm cold as cold can be. That is literally like the hollow feeling that Patch and Saint honestly feel after the incident with Aaron that happens, where Patch is taken, Saint's the only one looking for him. Everything is scary now, and the lighthouse beam has just run out. Like the light has blinked out. They're cold, they're alone, they're floating. And the chorus is, I want to swim away but don't know how. Sometimes it feels just like I'm falling in the ocean. Let the waves up and take me down. Let the hurricane set in motion. Let the rain of what I feel right now come down. Goodbye. This is truly just the overwhelming sense of hollowness and grief and pain that they felt. This is the feeling that Patch never could reconcile until he saw Grace. The empty holes in his heart, just wanting to let the waves come and sweep you away because it would be easier than dealing with the emotions that are swirling in. There's one line here, I'm left behind, I'm treading for my life, believe me, how can I keep up this breathing? And I think that line is really with Saint. Like, I am treading here. Like, I am fighting for my life. I'm fighting for my life with Jimmy. I'm fighting for my life to make sure that these girls are taken care of. I'm fighting for my life because I lost the one friend that I had and the one true love of my life. Not knowing how to think, I scream aloud, begin to sink. My arms and legs are broken down with envy for the solid ground. I'm reaching for the life within me. How can one man stop his ending? I thought of just your face, relaxed and floated into space. And like the thought of Patch to Saint or Grace to Patch, thinking of your face is the one thing that kept them tethered to life, that kept them tethered to the here and now, even if it was a traumatic thing. But the like little bridge part says, Now waking to the sun, I calculate what I had done, like jumping from the bough just to prove I knew how. It's midnight's late reminder of the loss of her, the one I love, my will to quickly end it all, set front row in my need to fall. Just the loss of her, the one that I love.
Mm-hmm.
Patch truly believed that he fell in love with Grace. Saint truly believed that she was in love with Patch. The loss of the one that you love and those constant reminders of that empty feeling and how much easier it would be to just end it. And instead, Patch ends up turning to a life of more of like a vigilante justice, and Saint turns to a life of actual justice and taking the law into her hands. And both of them are fighting for the same things similarly.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of goes hand in hand. It ends just by repeating into the ocean goodbye, end it all goodbye. And I just thought the overall vibes of this song, I feel like if you know Blue October, like their music tends to be a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more like downtrodden. And I just thought the vibes, the lyrics, the references to oceans with the pirates, like all of that, as soon as I listened to it, I was like, yeah, it's definitely the one. So that's why I picked Into the Ocean. I've been listening to it on repeat and like having a resurgence of my love for the song. So,
I'll have to listen. I know Blue October, but I need
hmm
to listen to like that song specifically.
yeah.
I chose It's Nice to Have a Friend by
hmm
Taylor Swift, our girl, because I think the underlying theme of this book is the friendship between Patch and Saint,
Yes.
like the pirate and the beekeeper.
hmm
So the song it's a very short song, but it starts off like school bell rings, walk me home, sidewalk chalk covered in snow. Lost my glove, you give me one. Wanna hang out? Yeah, sounds like fun. And I just
hmm
feel like that's their friendship at the beginning. Like,
yeah.
you know, just that feels like that 13-year-old friendship just like growing right there.
hmm
And I mean, the song's called It's Nice to Have a Friend, so it's nice that they have each other.
Yeah.
There's like the last verse, it's like church bells ring, carry me home, which like the church bells, I'm like, oh my gosh, Eli Aaron and those stupid
hmm
rosaries. But really, it's like have my back every day, feels like home. And I feel like that is their friendship. Like they stuck up for one another no matter what happened throughout their lives. And even if you throw Misty in there too, like, if she didn't have Patch wanting to be her friend,
hmm
it would have been different there too.
Yeah.
And so I think just the whole song, just it's nice to have a friend is that theme, and it's just reminds you of it because she repeats it so many times. But
Yeah.
it's nice to have a friend. It feels very caring, very like juvenile song, but it's like a
hmm
deeper feeling. Like it's nice to have a friend. Those friends that you've had since like day one. And
Yeah.
that just kind of reminds me of the two of them and
Totally.
what it all sums down to.
Yeah. I love that. I am a fan of that song. I was very unsure at first. It's not my fave, but I do enjoy it quite a
Yeah,
bit.
same.
So, are we ready to talk about our book ratings?
No,
Same.
but we have to.
We do. Okay. I've been debating. So, I think for different reasons, I'm going to rate this the same thing that I rated The Ministry of Time, and I'm going to give it 2.5 moons. Because part of me wants to give it 2 moons. However, I'm going to give it the extra half because I do see why people enjoyed this. Like I absolutely do. It just was not for me. But it has the exact opposite problem of The Ministry of Time. Whereas like I feel like we could have cut out easily 250 of these pages and gotten the exact actually more impact on the story. The Ministry of Time, I wanted more pages. So it's like the opposite problems that I had. So I feel like justified in my same ranking, like same rating of the two of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm gonna go 2.5 Saturns as well.
Yeah.
It's either that or 3. Like I was like the opposite of you
Mm-hmm.
with that, because it lost me in the middle, but I loved the beginning and I was hooked at the end. But I think I still gotta do 2.5. Like it's just not something that I would recommend to people to read.
No.
But I can see why people like it, and I don't hate
Yes.
it. Like I don't want to sit here and be like it's a horrible book. I did not vibe with it.
Yeah. I just think that in my opinion, it could have done with a massive edit.
Hmm.
Massive edit. I think I'm just realizing that like this style of writing is not my style. And like we're never going to know unless we read this kind of
Yeah.
style of writing. Like we've never really covered anything quite like the Ministry of Time. We've never covered anything quite like this. So
Mhm.
we know this type of writing is probably not our vibe.
Yep.
So again, if you enjoyed this book or the Ministry of Time, I promise, like, we don't think that you're a terrible person for enjoying those books. Like,
No,
this is the beauty of reading, is that, like, we hope that you enjoy the books that you pick up. And
like the two people that recommended The Ministry of Time and All the Colors of the Dark to me, I still will take all of their book recommendations
yes,
because I still trust them, and
yes,
we can like different books.
exactly.
Here and there.
Yeah, it just comes down to style. And, like, we've talked about it before, too. And I just hate that it's this like box that we put people in. It's like, oh, if you disliked one book that I liked, or if I disliked one book that you like, all of a sudden I don't trust any and all of your book recommendations, which is wild because Hannah and I have vastly different tastes in a lot of ways, but we end up liking a lot of the same books. Because like that's what life is. Like you're allowed to have that. So I feel like I just needed that disclaimer because we had 2 rough review episodes back to back. And I think our next one's going to be a lot of fun because our next review episode, all of our review episodes are 2 weeks apart. Our next one is coming out on February 5th, which is our Super Bowl episode. So we picked something very on brand, very on theme, and we're reviewing the sports romance Playbook by Rebecca Genshak. And it's just in time to get the vibes right for the Super Bowl.
Yes. But next week we have a very special episode from the vault, the manuscript. So it's featuring Whit Stanfield, who we did talk to this past September. Her book just came out in December about her debut novel of A Sea of Song and Sirens. But she's coming back to discuss the sequel, the second in the Naiads of Jewel series, A Sea of Wrath and Scoria. So don't miss out on that one.
It was a really fun episode. We have a blast talking to Whit every time. So you guys will not want to miss out on that one. But thank you for listening and for sticking with us. This is an episode.
Yep. If you made it this far, we really appreciate you. And please leave either a pirate or a bee emoji in the comments.
Or both if you're feeling fancy.
Yep. But also follow us on Instagram. Probably not on TikTok because it's past January 20th. But anyway, Discord, Patreon. Give us your thoughts on the Discord server because we do need some of your recommendations for our Vault series, for our Vault episode of Look What You Made Me Read. Or on social media or in person. If you see us on the street, just holler.
Please do. So we will see you all next week with our Vault episode of A Sea of Wrath and Scoria with Whit Stanfield.
And remember, keep reading with kindness.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.